This is the first video of the nervous system unit. This unit is huge. It is often considered the most challenging in the course, and a lot of that challenge comes because the very first lecture is necessary for understanding the other lectures. So if people tell you the nervous system is really hard, the way to make it easier on yourself is to take the very first lecture very seriously, so that when you come to the next set of lectures, you understand everything as you hear it. That's really going to be necessary. So what you can see on this slide is the number of chapters that we'll be covering, and today we'll cover the first two: fundamentals of the nervous system and nervous system tissue, and central nervous system. So that's the brain and the spinal cord and associated structures. It's kind of amazing that there is more to it than this. There's plenty of structures to learn in the nervous system, but more important really is the organization of the nervous system, and that's what this first set of slides walks you through. So this is the fundamentals of the nervous system and tissue and neurotransmission. And this picture here is just a gorgeous picture of a neuron. And it's really a whole bunch of neurons that are basically taking information from other neurons and sending it along. That's what neurons do, and I'll walk you through it. You're going to see a lot of slides in these lectures that just have a lot of information, and again, as always, I ask you to bear with me. These slides are your textbook, so you can get everything you need from the slides. So make sure you download the slides and be able to go through them. Also, we're going to be dealing with hierarchies here. So there are situations where you have to understand one thing in order to understand another. There are situations where within one system, there are two other systems, and there are two systems within each of those systems. So it's going to be important for you to keep track of those hierarchies. Also, we're going to find overlapping classifications. So, for example, I'll teach you the type of neurons. You're going to have to learn the different structural classifications of neurons, so how we describe and classify them by their structure, but also the functional classification. So what exactly do they do? What role do they play in the nervous system? Those overlap imperfectly, and so you'll have to pay attention to that. And then, of course, this is anatomy, so we'll be learning where everything is, what it's made of, what its structure is, what it's called, all that stuff. And of course, you'll be learning how the whole system works together. This is a slide of the major topics of the nervous system, and we'll be covering the first 6 of these today. Oh, and I think I left one off, but anyway, the point is there are a lot of topics. Let's go. So we're going to start with the nervous system organization, and this really is going to be some of the most fundamental, important stuff you're going to learn. So again, resist the temptation to ignore this. Just resist the temptation to ignore this. Make sure you study this before you move on to the next topic. And when we look at tissues and neurons and the structure of a neuron, I'll show you sort of what neurons do, how they take in information, how they send out information. Take your time with this topic. Understand neurons and what they do and how they work. That is really going to be necessary for moving past this lecture and understanding the others. And in my experience, students who really do grasp these things and do take the time with this first lecture, they do fine on this unit. So please just take my advice and take that seriously. And then we'll see lots of structures of the brain. The brain has a lot of different parts that do a lot of different things, and I'll walk you through how to understand that, and a similar thing could be said about the spinal cord. So those are the topics for today, and they're going to be split up over numerous videos and 3 sets of slides, or maybe 2 sets of slides. I don't remember. Anyway, lots of videos, lots of slides. It's a lot for one day. As It always is when we start a new unit. We teach the most challenging topics first so you have lots of time to work on them. Okay, so this is the basic set of divisions of the nervous system. And we divide it into the central nervous system, or CNS, and that's the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, and that's everything else. So that includes the cranial nerves. You may not have heard of cranial nerves before, but what they are is nerves that come directly out of the brain through the skull, and they typically innervate the head. Most of them innervate parts of the head. What does it mean while we're doing this? What does it mean to innervate? What does that mean? Well, that's going to mean to, let's see, that's going to be connect to the nervous system. And that, I don't know, that's not going to make a lot of sense in this context. But if I say that a cranial nerve innervates part of the head, like the optic nerve is a cranial nerve, it innervates the retina of the eye. It takes information from a part of the body, specifically the eye, and it brings it to the central nervous system. So maybe I can change my definition and write central. Oh dear. My bad. Let's try that again. Central nervous system. That's what I meant when I said innervate connects to the nervous system. It connects to the central nervous system. I apologize for the confusion, but this is a good definition of what it means to innervate. So, cranial nerves are going to innervate mostly the head outside the brain, and then spinal nerves are going to innervate things like muscles and skin for the rest of the body. So typically if you hear somebody talk about a nerve, like the sciatic nerve or the ulnar nerve, those are spinal nerves. They connect to the central nervous system at the spinal cord. So that's what we're showing here. All these yellow things are nerves connected to the spinal cord. And we'll also see ganglia and sensory receptors once we get there. So make sure you can list these topics. So then, what do these things do? Well, I'm going to skip this slide real quick so we can just look at a diagram. Basically, the peripheral nervous system has two parts. It has the sensory part and the motor part. And you'll see there are different names for that, but basically, the sensory part of the nervous system takes information in from your eyes and your ears, from your skin, from your muscles, any kind of information that the brain might need. It sends that information to the central nervous system, to the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord decides what to do with information, and it sends signals out through the motor system. And those signals that go out will do things like control muscles and control glands. So when we break down the nervous system into its major parts, we really are thinking in terms of sensory signals going towards the brain, motor signals going away from the brain, and the brain making the decisions about everything. I don't know if this seems too simple to you or not, but do maybe pause the video and say this in your own words. So just pause it, 3, 2, 1, and we're back. I hope you did take that time to restate sensory and motor in your own words. So let's go back to slide 8. This just explains what I just showed you on slide 9. So if you want to pause and read this, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. This says basically the same thing, but it draws it in a different way. So this diagram here shows the CNS. What do you think that stands for? Hopefully you came up with central nervous system. And if that's central nervous system, this would be peripheral nervous system. And remember, the peripheral nervous system has a motor division and a sensory division. So this slide is showing you some other terminology. So for example, sensory is often called afferent. Those kind of are synonyms for each other, and you have to be able to use both of them. Motor signals are efferent, and those are synonyms for each other. So the motor is the efferent division, sensory is the afferent division. So how do you remember these two words that look so similar? Well, the mnemonic device for this is they sound the same. Sensory, afferent. Motor, efferent. So hopefully that mnemonic device will help you keep afferent and efferent straight in your head. Okay, so this is an intimidating diagram of the organization of the nervous system. These are the different major divisions of the nervous system. So let's identify first what I've already talked about. Of all the things on this messy slide, what have we seen before? Well, if we go up to the top, central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, integrative and control centers. That's how we describe the job of the brain and spinal cord. It integrates information, brings it all in, and does something with it. The peripheral nervous system is everything else. And so the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system send each other signals. We also saw the sensory or afferent division brings information in towards the brain. And the motor or efferent division takes information from the brain. Now, these are new things that I haven't showed you yet. The motor division has two parts. It has the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. And let's see, let me break this down. We're further going to divide the autonomic nervous system into sympathetic and parasympathetic. So all of these things are new, and I'm going to walk you through some of the things that are written in here so that you can understand this better. And ultimately, you need to be able to draw this whole diagram. Maybe not so much these pictures over here, and these pictures are helpful, but what you want to be able to do is draw this whole table, this whole tree structure from memory. So let's get into it. One of the things you'll notice in that previous slide are the words somatic and visceral. And somatic and visceral we haven't really talked about. They refer to body regions, more or less. They mostly refer to body regions. So the somatic body region is external to the ventral body cavity. So if this is the ventral body cavity, you're familiar with it, thoracic, abdominal, pelvic. That's where we have what we call our visceral organs. So the somatic body region is everything outside of that. The visceral body region is everything sort of within the ventral cavity and continuous with it. So, yeah, the urinary system is visceral. The digestive system is mostly visceral. The mouth would be controlled partly by with the rest of the visceral body system. And the reason we separate these things is that in the brain they are separated. They are controlled separately and distinctly. So you'll see that different divisions of the nervous system control the somatic and visceral body regions separately. So now would be a good time to pause and make sure you understand where the somatic body region is and where the visceral body region is. And then we will go and look at how that's reflected in the nervous system. So go ahead and pause. 3, 2, 1. Hopefully during that pause you walked through the somatic and visceral body regions. Because ultimately the the nervous system is divided into 4 subdivisions. And here we're talking about the peripheral nervous system. So we're not talking about the brain, we're not talking about the spinal cord, we're talking about this nervous system everywhere else. And the subdivisions are somatic sensory, visceral sensory. So you have 2 separate systems for getting information to your brain from here, the visceral region. You have one system for this, and you have one system for getting information to your brain from everywhere else in your body. So the visceral system would be here, somatic would be everywhere else. And then we also have somatic motor and visceral motor, and those would be signals going from the central nervous system to the rest of the body. That would be somatic motor, or to the ventral body cavity and continuous structures. That would be the visceral motor or autonomic nervous system. And the visceral motor nervous system is unique and very distinct, and we will spend a whole lecture on it later in this unit. So these are the major divisions of the peripheral nervous system: the somatic sensory, visceral sensory, somatic motor, and visceral motor. And these are descriptions of them. So if you can't see it on this video, make sure you look on the slides at these descriptions, and we will come back to them many times. Okay, so here's this diagram, and I want you to pause this video and see if you can figure out what should go in these different boxes. So before I show you what's in the boxes, I want you to pause and label as many of them as you can in your notes, okay? So label the boxes in your notes. 3, 2, 1, pause. Okay, let's see how you did. Central nervous system, and that means the rest of it must be peripheral. Peripheral nervous system is going to have sensory and motor divisions. Sensory division has both somatic and visceral parts to it. Motor division is also going to have somatic and visceral systems. Notice SSVS, that's somatic sensory, visceral sensory, SMVM, somatic motor, visceral motor. And then the visceral motor system is special. It's divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. So that is going to conclude our brief introduction to the divisions of the nervous system. Before you move on, go back through this. Go back through the whole thing and make sure you have it in your notes so that you can study it as soon as you have, as soon as you've taken the upcoming bone exam. Okay, we will reconvene once you have looked over this at the next video.